Hello, I just wanted to go ahead and start a new recording here for my wireless class. Unfortunately, I will admit to this morning I went through a lecture and I forgot to record. So if you're watching this, I guess this is because I had neglected to record something earlier, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at where we're at. I'll go through my lecture. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to talk about how to use wireless networks. And really, I got to tell you, the wireless networks are pretty straightforward because it does everything that any other network would do. WINS, your TCP/IP, it does all of that stuff. It just does it with a radio transmitter rather than a cable. So let's go to the first slide. I'll say that TCP/IP works with it. All we're going to do here with wireless is we're going to replace the cabling. The bad thing about replacing the cabling is it's transmitting out into the environment, and anybody with an antenna can receive the message. So that's why we try to encrypt it to try and stop people from being able to grab our wireless transmission and figure out what we're trying to transmit back and forth. Another problem is wireless is affected by noise. You think of it this way: if we were both running on the same clock, that is to say, we know where each millisecond is, and I give you a transmission or I don't give you a transmission for that millisecond, well, you would know that would be a yes, there is a transmission for a one, or no, there is no transmission for a zero, and that would allow us to transmit one and a zero over the wireless in the case of a millisecond. Only they're measuring it in nanoseconds. The problem here is if there's a lot of radio noise or other transmissions in that area, it can sort of make the signal seem worse. Not that you'll have false zeros, but you'll have false ones in the signal, and that would degrade the digital signal. So it is affected by the environment, and that's one of the biggest problems with wireless. So the hardware that we're going to use, we are using wireless routers in the classroom. I think you're used to or familiar with taking a look at this technology. We are going to use a wireless adapter as well. They can be ran through USB or a card. Also, we have these access points. So notice this access point looks like a fire system. And we do this a lot in the hospital. This access point is acting like the transmitter here in the wireless router. The router could still perform its function. It's just that it connects to the Ethernet port here on this transmitter, and there might be a power port. There might be power over Ethernet where it receives its power from the router, other things like that. Basically, when we put this out in a hospital environment and it looks like a fire alarm system, people don't tamper with it. When it looked like a wireless router and there were transmissions and lines coming off of there, people for some reason would jump up and try and rip the antennas off, and they did that for fun. But for some reason, people don't want to be the idiot hanging from a ceiling, hanging from a fire alarm when the fire alarm goes off. They're really deterred to do that. So we made our access points look like fire systems, and that's what stopped people from monkeying with them. So we're going to use a lot of the software. We're going to talk about the software. I've got a software simulator here. If you go to the website, the class website, it'll point you to the lab. The lab itself here tells you what to do. This is where we're talking about the wireless. You go to this website here for the wireless software simulator. Here's a wireless software simulator. And like I've said here, I'm sorry to say wireless software. How about the wireless router software simulator? You'll notice the three main things that we're concerned with are right here. We're concerned with how the device connects to the internet, how the device connects internally. That is to say, the things that connect to it, what type of IPs do they use, and then how are the wireless settings set up. And those are the three main things that you need to focus on when you're focusing on the setup. And you'll notice right here in Tomato, and this is a hacked up software where I've reprogrammed the routers. I'm sort of midway through reprogramming the routers. If you get one that's loaded with Tomato, fantastic. Here is the wide area network, so that's how does it connect to the next router. Here's the internal stuff, how does it connect to the devices that are connecting to it. That is, how does the router handle people that want to connect to it. And then down here in the wireless, it talks about how you're connecting to other machines through the wireless. That is, how do machines connect to the wireless router without having to plug up to it. Now that is a replacement for the stock software. This is what the stock software would look like. I go to the next screen. This is what a stock software would look like. You might have the DDWRT. It looks very similar to this and acts very similar to this. It's just expanded slightly. You will find the same basic concepts echoed throughout all of this. So, notice here it's under basic setup. It's concerned with how am I connecting to the next router, and it's set to DHCP. And then here in the local, it's how am I connecting to my people that are connecting to me to get to the internet. And so, yeah, that's going to be something you'd be concerned with. The wireless would be the next tab over. So, Tomato, like I say, that sort of puts them all on one page so that people don't have to worry too much about it, and I like that. I really do like that setting. So let's look at the wireless settings. I'm going to look at the Tomato software for that. Notice some of the concepts here that are going to be part of the wireless. First off, you can turn off the wireless. There is no reason to continue to run that wireless router as a wireless router if you have a separate access point that's handling just these settings. The next thing here is the MAC address. This is how the router would identify itself wirelessly to other people. Notice the person that put this image out wanted to blank that so that no one knew who they are, and that's probably smart of them because you can track them with that. The wireless mode. Now this wireless client, that's interesting. That means that the router is going to connect wirelessly to another device as if it were a client, not a provider of a wireless, not a wireless access point, but a client connecting to another device. You actually want to run this as an access point, not as a client. So the next one, BG. Notice that these are the speeds or the versions of wireless that we're using. A is present. Also, AX is present. We'll talk about AX in a little bit. A is the first version, which was not used as much. They quickly replaced A with B, version B, wireless version B. Yes, there is a wireless version C, D, and E, and F. Those were not good versions. We chose not to use those. There is a wireless G. Wireless G was fantastic, so that became the next, what we call Gen 2, right there. Actually, come to think of Gen 1 was A, Gen 2 is B, Gen 3 is G, Gen 4 is N. Yes, there are letters in between G and N, but those formats did not catch on. Wireless N is fantastic. It gives you a speed jump, and AC gives you a speed jump as well. This is the most recent one. It's about 3-4 years old. Actually, come to think of it, it's not the most recent one. The most recent one is AX, which is the next standard. The reason why it's 2 letters is because, yes, they ran all the way to Z, and the wirelesses between N and Z did not catch on. So they had to figure out, okay, well, what do we do now that we're continuing to create things beyond Z? Well, somebody said, well, let's just make it 2 letters. We'll do A and then the next one. So there was an AA and an AB. Those were not popular. AC was popular. There is an AD, AE, AF, all the way through AX, which was the next popular one, what we call Gen 6, and that's what's going to be coming out. So all of those speeds are things that you have to choose. This is older. B is older and most compatible. AC or AX is the newest, which is the fastest. They are going to talk about AX, AC, and AX being reverse compatible because they use multiple transmitters and they can downgrade their transmitter to G or N as needed. I don't really like a mixed mode. The AX and AC does it in completely different manners, and we'll talk about the AX here in a little bit. The SSID, this is the name of the router. This is what people would see when they do a site scan. A site scan being a, hey, who is out there? And we'll talk about doing the site scan. There are also going to be channels that you would broadcast on. Notice this one does have a scan, so it does have an integrated site scan that you can use. And then we'll talk about the 3 securities, WEP, WPA, WPA version 2. Yes, there is a WPA version 3 now. It's coming out, but because the standard really isn't very popular yet, so a lot of people aren't using it yet. So when it comes to encryption, WPA and WPA2 give you an encryption option. There's going to be TKIP and AES. TKIP is older, AES is newer. That's all you really have to remember. The great thing about WPA, WPA2, WPA3 is they use what's called a shared key, so they have a password, and we'll talk about writing secured passwords in this. Notice it got a group renewal key. It's at 3600 seconds. That is 1 hour. So let's go talk about those frequencies again. Here are the speeds. You'll notice that AX is the 6th gen, Wi-Fi 6th gen. It does have a better compatibility where multiple access points are used. Okay, so here's the thing. This is going to be Mimo, multi-user, multi-in, multi-out. I noticed that the picture sort of clipped that up there. Mimo is where you're using multiple transmitters. Like some of the AX transmitters will have as much as 8 separate radios on them. And what they're doing is they have the ability to set one of the radios at a different speed, like G or N or AC. And they can communicate to certain people. They also have something they call color. Color is a way of chopping up a signal where you can stay on one frequency. You can go, okay, I'm going to talk to the users that have been assigned the red color. You want this message. And the users that have been assigned the orange color. You want this message. And they they say, this color, here's the message. This color, here's the message. And so there's sort of this way of sharing frequencies because they can mix that in one pulse. It's actually a pretty unique technology, but it allows them to basically carry on different conversations with different radios simultaneously with different formats. So there is a particular backwards compatibility, and as far as Mimo is concerned, AC and AX are the multi-user, multi-in, multi-out. So AX also has introduced, there are the new frequencies. There is a standard 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequencies. We'll talk about frequencies here a little bit when we talk about site scans. AX also does frequencies 1 and 6 and 7. And notice here I've got the Mimo where you can, or Mimo, where you can talk to multiple devices on the same channel at the same time. You also have the coloring where it can ignore certain transmissions, and it ends up chopping the frequency up a little bit when it does that. Honestly, I'll be honest, this is going to be something we're going to see roll out in hospitals pretty quickly, but the devices are going to be slower to adapt to it. I think that we're going to see the AX stands for a long time. So the SSID, let's talk about the SSID. That is the name here. You'll notice in the middle here, I've got like Eat at Joe's, your company message here. That's the SSID. Whatever you put there is what people are going to see when they're trying to connect, right? You can set it to not broadcast. If you set it to not broadcast, it'll say other network if it even shows up. If you do that, it'll ask what is the network name, and it'll ask that when it's asking the security. So you have essentially another password to cover with this. And some people, they just do this. They just hide the SSID name because that essentially gave them a crude password. Okay, so site scans. Remember, when you do a site scan in Tomato, if you do a site scan, you'll end up with this. These are not places to put things. These are people. Think there again, these are like lanes on a highway. There's 12 people jammed in the first lane. There are 12 lanes, 1 through 11. There's 11 people jammed in lane 6. There's 17 people jammed in lane 11. And yeah, these lanes are like half lanes, so they sort of take up some space. And so you want to try and put your access point somewhere where it's away from others. You'll notice the best thing here may be 4. I don't know. It's your choice. Now, you do have to keep in mind channel overlap. This causes a lot of problems. Notice I got a broadcast here on channel 9, a broadcast here, several broadcasts on channel 11. You'll notice how the frequencies from 9 bleed almost all the way over to 11. And how 11 bleeds almost all the way over to 9, so there's a little frequency overlap and some noise issues. You'll also notice one of the things I like about this picture is this phone. Unfortunately, this actually went to the Supreme Court. We do not have the ability to tell people to turn off their phones. If they want to walk around, squawking and making a bunch of noise, that's between them and AT&T and not you. And even if you're trying to operate a life-saving device, it doesn't matter. You need to get out of their way, not the other way around. And that is the official ruling from the FCC. Trust me, Amy's tried to fight it. And that's a good example as to why you want to join Amy, so that you can actually fight things like this, so that we have a chance to, I don't know, save lives, which apparently is not as important as AT&T specifically wanting to have a phone in a customer's hand. And that's basically the ruling on it. So this is what a site scan will show. This is what you're up against in the field, and unfortunately, this is going to create artificial noise, and it's going to cause problems with your devices. And I'm sorry to tell you, we just have to figure out solutions. So, big question is, well, what are the solutions? Well, the solution is to find things like here. And I know I clipped off the bottom here, but you'll notice that we got one transmitter at about 1. We got a hole at 6, and then a whole bunch at 11. Well, you would want to find your opportunity at 6. And it would list all these channels. And if you'll notice here in channel numbers, there's a whole bunch at 11. There's one at 9 and one at 1. So yeah, probably around 5 gives you the best opportunity to get a transmission in this group. So then we get stuff like the 5 megahertz band, gigahertz band. The 5 gigahertz band is going to give us additional transmissions. If you'll notice, there's a lower portion to the band, then there's this hole between 60 and 100, and then there's a higher portion in the band. Also, you'll notice that they just sort of chopped up the frequencies here to where there's gaps. So you can overlap things pretty easily. You'll notice that you can't put anything in this gap. The closer you get to this, the more bleed over you get from the people that are using these frequencies. I've been told that Doppler weather channels use these frequencies, so if you get too close to them, the local TV station's weatherman will actually knock out your Wi-Fi. So there's things like that. So let's look at the 2.4. This is what an N transmission looks like. It's multiple transmissions here, and I can tell you that it basically is like this G transmission, only there's 2 G transmissions. It was also a little higher speed, so 3 times the speed, 2 channels simultaneously. So being able to do that transmission increased the gap from G to N about 6 times the speed. N was really born with video transmissions in mind. I want you to look over here at the G, or the 5 gigahertz here. Not the G transmission, but the 5 gigahertz here. You'll notice that this one right here is double the width as the other ones, because this is what a dual channel looks like. And you'll notice that it's got a lot more space in which to do these transmissions. So G gives you a little bit more of a opportunity to transmit. The downside on G is G does not carry. It does not have the same distance as 2.4. Yes, lower frequencies have longer transmissions. When you look at these point-to-point radio transmissions, they try and put themselves around 600 to 2.4, and actually they like 900 and other things like that, so that they're low, because lower transmissions frequencies have a longer transmission length. So 5 gigahertz is really good for homes and apartments because of the weak transmission, the weak penetration of the transmission. The lower frequencies, for some reason, just blow right through. So which is also probably why our power systems are on 60 hertz, is so that they have such a long transmission range. So looking at security, you'll notice there are 3 things you have to keep in mind: WPE, WEP, WPA, and WPA2. Notice that WPA and WPA2 use passphrases. WEP uses a hex key. If you can look at here, this is what a hex key looks like. So hex keys are really big. There's 26 characters there, 0 through 9, A through F, and that has to do with hexadecimal binary conversions. So yeah, WEP was a bear to set up. It was good, but the problem with WEP is it basically repeats its encryption every 35 to 50,000 packets. So when people are hacking them, they will actually look at the WEP key, repeating itself, and then they'll basically figure out your encryption. WPA was good from that perspective, but what they found out is they found out if you knew what the message should look like, that it was easy to crack. So what they do is they do what's called a poisoning. They cause you to log off and then bounce back onto the wireless, then log off and bounce back onto the wireless. And they know what that transmission should look like. So if they capture enough encryptions of it, they can figure out how you're encrypting it. WPA2, I used to tell people it's double encrypted, but it's not really the best way to explain it. There's just more bits in there, so it's harder to break, but in fact, actually, they crack it in 2 steps. The first step is they break the first level, like the WPA, where they get the message. Yeah, they go ahead and they can figure out at least a couple of the bits of the encryption. The rest of the bits of the encryption, they'll actually throw passwords at it. If you capture enough of these deauthentication, reauthentications, and then you basically set those up in simulation and then throw passwords at it, eventually, if you can figure out that password, you'll be able to cause the key to be easily figured out. So these password lists are available online. People will put new passwords out there. There's so many millions of different passwords. So it's a good idea to be mindful of that with WPA2, you're only as strong as your password. I do also want to take a look at this. This is what the settings look like in Tomato. Remember that the 3600 seconds means 1 hour. Notice this is a huge password. If you do stuff like that, it's hard for people to crack, but it's also hard for you to remember. And imagine telling everybody that wants to use your wireless, okay, this is your password, and then giving them 50 or so characters. It's really hard to remember that. So you want to use a password that's a little easier. I suggest a whole sentence. Notice here, WPA2, there is a selection between TKIP and AES. TKIP was the technique used with WPA. AES was used with WPA version 2. So I'm sure with WPA3, we're going to have yet another encryption style. Now, I want to show you what a password can look like. Now, if you can read this, notice that I've replaced, or that they have replaced in this image, the zeros have been replacing the O's, and 3s are replacing E's. And notice that we use a couple of these back and forwards for why. So why do people make it so difficult to read this their writing by doing this crazy leet speak thing? It's actually right down here. You can read it right there. So notice that you can replace certain things. You can do a phrase, "You will not crack this," and there's your password. Good luck figuring that out. So that should be about all that you need to really know as far as the wireless is concerned. One more thing, what I'd like to cover is if you go up here, you type like hacking WPA2.
4 and 5 gigahertz.
You're going to end up with a lot of different things. You can go ahead and go cracking WPA3. Yes, that's been done. Cracking WEP. And then videos will actually walk you through what to do. All you have to do is click on a video, push pause. God, that guy looks creepy. Okay, so moving down here, you'll notice he's got all sorts of different links in which you can figure things out, and he'll literally walk you through how. God, that guy's freaking me out. I'm going to go back. Okay, so truth of the matter here is you will be able to figure out how to crack things just by watching YouTube